Hey Mary, I heard about this really cool paddling class about the Tamsui River. Do you want to join me?
Sure, that sounds like fun. What can we learn?
We'll learn paddling techniques and the history of the river. I've never been on a canoe, so I'm excited to learn.
Me too. What kind of equipment do we need?
We need canoes, paddles, and storage compartments. The instructor will teach us about the different types of equipment available.
That sounds like it'll be useful for our next paddling adventure.
Definitely. But before we explore the history of the river, we need to learn the basics of paddling. The instructor will teach us about maintaining forward momentum, turning, and increasing speed.
I never thought about the proper angles and posture we need for paddling. That's interesting.
Right? And understanding the proper techniques will also help us stay on course and propel the boat forward.
Speaking of the history of the river, what can we expect to learn about?
The Tamsui River has a rich history, from important events to cultural significance. Knowing that history will let us connect more deeply with the region where we live and study.
Wow, I had no idea. This will be a great opportunity to learn and explore something new.
Exactly. All right, let's get ready for the class and make sure we remember everything we learned for our next paddling adventure.
Sounds like a plan. Thanks for inviting me.
No problem, Mary. Let's have some fun out there on the river.
Have you heard anything else about the history of the Tamsui River?
Yes, actually. The instructor mentioned Ichiaku, a village near the Tamsui estuary. It was a site of a sea mine camp during the Sino-French War. It's amazing to think that we'll be paddling near such a historically significant area.
Wow, that is so interesting. I'm glad we'll be learning about all the different layers of history that the river has to offer.
Yeah, and not just the history. The river itself is supposed to be really beautiful. The instructor mentioned that Reverend George Leslie Mackay loved the Tamsui River and even preached here in the 1800s.
That's amazing. I can't wait to see the river for myself.
Same here. And who knows? Maybe one day we can even do our own paddling trip down the Tamsui River and explore more of Taiwan's waterways.
That sounds like a great idea. I think we're definitely on the right track to becoming skilled paddlers and history enthusiasts.
Definitely. Let's get ready and make the most of this class. I can't wait.
Me too. Can you remind me again what kind of equipment we'll be using?
Sure, the instructor mentioned that we'll be using canoes, paddles, and storage compartments. The canoe is the main vessel that we'll be paddling in, and the paddle is what we'll be using to maneuver and propel the canoe forward. The storage compartment is for any gear or items we might want to bring with us.
Okay, and do you remember him going into more detail about the paddles, in terms of their specific functions?
Yes, he did. He talked about how the shape and size of the paddle affects how quickly we can paddle and how much control we have over the canoe. And he also mentioned that different types of paddles work better in different types of water, like calm versus rough water.
Interesting. It sounds like there's a lot more to paddling than just sticking a paddle in the water and pulling back.
Definitely. But that's why I'm excited about this class. We're going to learn the proper techniques for paddling and using the equipment so we can have a safe and enjoyable experience on the river.
Me too. I can't wait to get started and see what else we'll learn in this class.
Same here. It's going to be an unforgettable experience. I am really excited about learning how to canoe on the Tamsui River. But I am curious, what is the history of this river?
Oh, the history of the Tamsui River is really fascinating. This river was once the center of trade and transportation for the region, which influenced the development and growth of the surrounding communities.
Wow, that's interesting. How did the river impact the growth of the communities?
Well, before the harbor was opened in 1862, the most popular product being traded here was tea. Taiwanese tea, in particular, was very profitable and even won the world championship during the European contest. But after the harbor was opened, other products like rice and chinaware were also traded here.
Did you know that the Tamsui River was an important part of the indigenous people's lives?
No, I didn't. Can you tell me more about it?
The river was critical to the survival of the Katagalan, Kavalan, and Tamsui Atayal people who originally lived in the area. They relied on it for transportation, food, and other resources, and it held spiritual and cultural significance to them.
That's fascinating. I wonder what kind of impact colonization had on their way of life and the river.
Unfortunately, colonization had a significant impact on the indigenous peoples and the Tamsui River. The arrival of foreign settlers led to conflicts and forced assimilation, which resulted in the loss of many traditional beliefs and practices. The river also faced environmental degradation due to industrialization and pollution.
That's very sad. Are there any efforts to preserve their culture and the river today?
Yes, there are. Many organizations promote indigenous culture and provide education on the history of the Tamsui River. There are also ongoing efforts to clean up the river and restore its natural beauty. It's important to recognize their history and make efforts to preserve their cultural heritage. Have you ever been to the Fuyo Temple in Tamsui?
No, I haven't. What's special about this temple?
Well, first of all, it's one of the oldest temples in Tamsui, with a history dating back over 200 years. It was originally built as a shrine to the goddess of mercy, but later became dedicated to Mazu, the goddess of the sea, who was believed to protect the fishermen and sailors on the river.
That sounds fascinating. Do you know any interesting stories related to the temple?
Yes, there is one famous story about the Fuyo Temple. During the time of the Sino-French War, the French forces were advancing towards Tamsui, but they were stopped by a group of brave local volunteers who fought them off at the Fuyo Temple. Legend says that the statue of Mazu in the temple turned her head to face the invaders, warning them not to trespass.
Wow, that's amazing. It's intriguing how Taiwanese history is so intertwined with religion and spirituality.
Yes, and that's one of the reasons why visiting the Fuyo Temple is such a unique and enriching experience. The architecture of the temple is stunning, and the incense-filled halls and peaceful atmosphere can transport you to another world. By the way, did you know that the Fuyo Temple in Tamsui is also famous for its creativity in celebrating festivals?
Really? How so?
Well, every year during the Mazu Festival, the temple hosts a grand procession where they parade with a unique boat-shaped paper sculpture called a jongbeo. It's a symbol of good fortune and blessings, and it's quite impressive to see it being carried around town by a large group of people.
That sounds like a lot of fun. I'd love to witness that someday.
You won't regret it. The atmosphere during the festival is unforgettable, with colorful lanterns, festive music, and delicious street food. It's a great opportunity to experience the local culture and traditions of Tamsui.
Thank you for sharing all this information with me, Tom. Now I'm excited to explore more of Tamsui's history and culture.
My pleasure. I'm happy to share my love for this place with others. Have a great time exploring. It's interesting that there used to be a sea airport near the Tamsui River, but it eventually declined due to it being a military place.
I didn't know that. Do you think it's possible for the airport to open again in the future?
It's hard to say. Since it's still a military camp in use, it's not open to ordinary people. But if it were to open in the future, it would be a great opportunity for people to learn more about the history of the area and how it's changed over time.
That's true. It would also be a unique experience for tourists who are interested in aviation history.
Yes, and the Tamsui River and surrounding area has a rich history that's worth exploring. For example, Uchiaku, a village near the Tamsui estuary, was a former site of a sea mine camp during the Sino-French War.
Wow, I had no idea. It's amazing how much history is hidden within these places.
Speaking of history, did you know that the Guandu Temple is one of the oldest temples in Taiwan?
Really? That's impressive. Can you tell me more about it?
Sure. The temple was first built in the 17th century during the Qing dynasty. It was dedicated to Mazu, the Chinese sea goddess, but later became an important place of worship for Guanyu, the Chinese god of war.
I see. That explains why the temple is located near the river. Do you know any interesting legends or stories associated with the temple?
Actually, yes. There is a famous legend that says during the Sino-Japanese War, the Japanese bombed the temple but the Guanyu statue remained unscathed. It's one of the reasons why the temple is considered a symbol of protection and blessings.
That's incredible. I can see why the temple is so important to the locals. Have you ever visited the temple yourself?
Yes, I have. The architecture of the temple is very impressive and the atmosphere is very serene. It's definitely a must-see for anyone interested in Taiwanese culture and history. The issue of pollution in the Tamsui River has been a concern for many years. It's been affected by industrial waste, sewage, and debris from land-based activities, which can harm the river's ecosystem and the people and animals that rely on it.
Is there a solution to this problem?
Yes, there are a few solutions that people and organizations have implemented to address this issue. One is to reduce the use of chemicals and other pollutants in industries along the river. Another is to increase public awareness of the issue and encourage people to take action to reduce waste and pollution, such as participating in river cleanup events and waste reduction programs.
That's great to hear. It's important to take care of our natural resources, especially ones that have such significant cultural.
Absolutely. We all have a responsibility to protect and preserve the natural environment for future generations. Wow, that was an amazing experience. I had no idea the Tamsui River had so much history and natural beauty.
I know, right? And I'm so glad we went with the eco-friendly canoe option. It felt good knowing that we were doing our part to protect the environment.
Yes, and I noticed that all the shops and businesses we visited were also promoting sustainable practices. It's great to see that the local community is committed to preserving the river and promoting ecotourism.
Absolutely. I also learned a lot about the history of the area, especially Uchiaku and the Sino-French War. It really added a new dimension to the experience.
Yes, the guide was very knowledgeable and shared some fascinating stories. And did you notice how clean the river was? It's clear that a lot of effort has gone into restoring and maintaining the water quality.
Definitely. I feel like we got to experience the best of both worlds, a fun recreational activity and a chance to learn about and support the local community and environment.